Welcome to AUC Authors Series. In this series of programs, we interview the authors in the Atlanta University Center community and introduce you to their latest published works. This program is produced by Brad Ost and Daniel Lee.
Today we are interviewing Dr. Mark Ellingsen, Professor of Church History at the Interdenominational Theological Center. Dr. Ellingsen is the author of 15 books and many articles. His most recent books include The Richness of Augustine, His Contextual and Pastoral Theology, and Blessed Are the Cynical, How Original Sin Can Make America a Better Place. Today we are going to be discussing his newest work, Sin Bravely, a Joyful Alternative to a Purpose-Driven Life. So, thank you very much, Dr. Ellingsen, for being here.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. The first question we'd like to ask you is if you could give us an overview of Sin Bravely and what it's about.
Sure. Well, the working presupposition of the book is America's a mess right now. Okay. Not just messed up with regard to our economic turmoils, but with regard to socially, the way we relate to each other, the way we see each other as tools for our self-satisfaction rather than community. Cornel West has talked about narcissism, and he's just right. I'm convinced of that, and part of the book takes a look at the validity of his analysis, why we're facing these kinds of problems that West so pointedly calls our attention to. Okay. Well, you would think the church would have something to do with this situation, have something to say. Unfortunately, the two loudest voices in American Christianity today are Rick Warren and his telling us that we need a purpose-driven life, and then the prosperity gospel preachers like Eddie Long, like colleagues like Joel Osteen. I wanted to take a look at their options and see if they really would help us get out of the mess we're in, and the answer is no. Okay. In fact, these are options that are not about changing society, but about individual satisfaction. I get my purpose. I get my prosperity. To heck with everybody else. It just plugs into the narcissism that Dr. West is talking about. Right. We need another option. Another thing wrong with these popular options is they fall prey to a heresy, an ancient heresy called Pelagianism, which is the idea that I've got to do something in order to get saved. I've got to do something in order to get a good life. Well, where are we going to look for another Christian option? Now, I am a Lutheran. I plead guilty. Okay. So I did my reading in Martin Luther. But I'm also teaching at an HBCU. And so I was directed to ancient Africa. And I found the answer to lie with Martin Luther and that ancient African theologian, his mentor, his spiritual mentor, St. Augustine. Their collective advice is sin bravely. That's how we can help to get America out of this mess. That's how we can find happiness. Now, what are you talking about, Ellingsen, when you say sin bravely?
Really?
Well, it doesn't mean do whatever the heck I want. What it means is get real. Get real about the way life is, that we're all sinners, that we're sinning in everything we do. You know, Brad, you and I are sinning right now, and so is our audience. Yeah. When you have that lifestyle, when you have that understanding, when you're ready to tell the truth like that, you become a rebel. You become somebody who gives the middle finger to the establishment when it's trying to sell its goods to you. Right. You're ready to be a critic. You're ready to work on behalf of liberation. But also because you know you're a sinner in everything you do, you're not so pompous about the good things you're doing. Because you realize if any good comes out of your sinning, it's got to be a miracle. It's got to be all about God. And so the brave sinner is somebody who is in touch with God in everything he or she does. Then what's fascinating is the latest neurobiological research, study of the human brain, indicates that when you live that other-directed life, you get happy. Yeah. You get good brain dope that makes you happy. Yeah. And so, at the conclusion of the book, not only do I offer some liberation, some hints for how social justice can be fostered and nurtured by this kind of sin bravely lifestyle, I'm also getting into how this kind of lifestyle can make you happy and how to live that way with happiness being a pleasant, happy result.
Dr. Ellingsen, this brings up some questions here, what you're saying about sin bravely, and especially I'm interested, I want to go back over several other things, but I'm especially interested in this idea of the brain generating a chemical when you focus correctly on God and seeking Him in the correct way, the brain seems to produce a chemical which comes alongside that right walking to, I don't know, reward you. I don't know if that's the right word. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's an excellent question, an excellent idea, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the conclusion because I don't want to say that God created us as sinners. I want to say that we're created good, and so if I completely accept your thesis, I'm on the road to Paul Tillich and some other theologians, Friedrich Schleiermacher, who said that we, in fact, are created in sin. So here's how I want to handle this. Yes, you're right, but I would want to say prior to the fall, the reward function of dopamine was, in fact, a pleasure that was incomplete if it didn't include the neighbor. Since the fall into sin, dopamine doesn't work that way. Now we have the clinical kinds of observations that the neurobiologists are making, that when I get my dopamine high, it's just me who gets the high. You don't get it.
Right.
And so in that sense, I'd want to say, yes, God created us with this apparatus, but it's not functioning quite the way God intended since the fall.
Okay. Good. That's very interesting. And let's go back a little bit to how we found ourselves in this position. And I'm just thinking in my own lifetime, I seem to have seen some trends, and I don't know if that's the specific word that should be used, but so born in the 1950s, so the traditional, and then in the 60s there was the Jesus people, then the evangelical movement takes off, then there's purpose-driven, prosperity gospel, emergent, postmodern. Are these attempts to move away from having to deal with neighbor, to focus on self, and every time it's found unsatisfactory, we move to a new trend, or am I reading that wrong, or what would you think?
I very much agree with you. I'd want to just add that is the evangelical movement completely bypassed? I mean, let's face it, Warren, Osteen, Long, other prosperity gospel preachers are evangelicals.
Right. Absolutely.
Let's put it this way. How about tracing it even further back, the line you're talking about? Let's go back to the Enlightenment. All of these movements, if not daughters of the Enlightenment, are reactions against it. And the Enlightenment was an individualistic movement. It gets us away from community. Right. And then the Christianity that comes out of that heritage is going to be individualistic. And I think that's true in the roll call you just mentioned of all those movements.
Right.
We need a movement, very much which the Black Church has always directed us to, a movement that really takes Christianity's communal, social dimension seriously. Sin Bravely is just another way of talking about that.
Right. But let me ask you this then, based upon that. If a large part of that started at the Reformation, this individualistic, move away from God, move away from community, reason, we're moving toward reason, self, is there, and I think you already mentioned part of it, is there a portion of the church that has hewed well to the community idea? Is it inbred in us to move away from community? Is your book always going to be fighting against the trend, I guess?
Okay, a couple of things. I wouldn't want to trace this individualism back to the Reformation.
Okay.
There are those scholars who would, certainly Enlightenment scholars would, but I would say that the Reformers, especially Luther, probably Calvin, maybe the Anabaptists, were in fact pre-modern people who had this communal aspect. So that's the first point. Okay. Now, your other issues. Will we always be going against the grain when we're sinning bravely? In a sense, yes. But are there other traditions that have maintained this kind of communal aspect? I've already mentioned the African American church at its best.
Right.
Of course, segments of that wonderful tradition have been co-opted by prosperity gospel,
right,
too.
Yeah.
Likewise, I want to say the Lutheran heritage. The Reformed heritages, at their best, have been communal as well.
Right.
But also co-opted by individualistic trends from the Enlightenment and Pietism at other points in their history.
So, I'm trying to drill a little deeper in this. If there was an individualistic, if there was a communal pattern before, and let's talk about the early church, it seemed to be everybody met and shared together and met in home churches. That seems to be the idealistic, hedonistic sort of view. Are we, personally, because of the fall, are we always seeking to be away from community, to focus on self, or is this somehow, when we get together, we desire to hew to our own calling? I'm not sure. I want to get it back somewhere else to say, is there hope?